Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're going to give 2 minutes to allow everyone to have some time to join us. Okay, well, I'm just going to go ahead and get started. And whenever someone joins us, they'll just join us wherever it's at. So, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Laura Posadas, and I'm part of VTA's community outreach team. Thank you for joining us to learn a little bit more about the proposed downtown San Jose Light Rail Realignment Project. Here with me today is my fellow colleagues. Omar from the community outreach team as well, the project manager, Jason, and the transportation planner supporting this project, Nick. So we do have a few different ground rules than normal community meetings that you've probably attended before for VT events. As some of you might know, you have received a few emails kind of saying that we recommend that you have two devices for this particular meeting. And the reason why is because we do have some interactive slides for you guys, and we do recommend having two devices. There's also a Q&A portion at the end of this presentation, so we do kindly ask that you do use the Q&A feature of the Zoom. And at the end, our project management team will actually answer some of your questions. And then just a heads up, we are recording this meeting. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jason.
It's Laura. Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you again for coming. Want to briefly talk about why we're all here today. As many of you know, we're currently working on a project to essentially reimagine the downtown light rail portion of our system, specifically looking at modifying the downtown transit mall and the tracks on First and Second. We're still in very early planning for the project, but we want to take this opportunity to get some early feedback on our current designs and get a better sense of what the community wants to see in terms of our priorities moving forward and how they want us to essentially kind of think about future project phases. I do want to stress that this is still very early in the planning process. We essentially have put together a design to help us understand if there's a feasible project here. And so we have a lot of time to both kind of make changes to the project and really figure out what we want to do with it. With that, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Nick Moore to go over some of the existing conditions downtown.
Great, thank you, Jason. Yeah, I'm going to give a little bit of context here, a little background on the downtown light rail configuration. So VTA's light rail has been in downtown since the late 80s. Many of you are probably riders or are familiar with our network downtown. If that's true, then you've probably noticed how slow the trains go through the downtown core. We're currently capped at 10 miles per hour, but in reality, we average closer to 6 miles per hour due to safety constraints. And it really has become a choke point for our whole network. This is in part because of the couplet configuration of the network. Our northbound buses and trains run on First Street, and then our southbound trains and buses run on Second Street. This means we have extra turns, like the one on Divine near St. James Park, in addition to that already slow speed. In general, our trains also take a very circuitous route through downtown between Diridon and Japantown. And another issue for us has been, the unique setup of the tracks themselves in the transit mall. The tracks are, if you're familiar with it, are flush with the sidewalk and kind of blend in. And this lack of delineation, while aesthetically pleasing, has led to a lot of cars and pedestrians on the tracks unnecessarily. And finally, the last hindrance to faster movement is the many at-grade crossings. So these are both streets with intersections and also driveways that intersect our route downtown. So instead of me just describing it, here's some pictures for reference to get your memory jogging about what the area looks like. So on the left here, you can see what the station platform looks like. And you can also see the flush tracks that I was just describing. In the middle, you can see the station, one of our platforms, and you can see the bus connection is there. Next slide, please. Then we have some more images here. Again, we have that platform on the left. There are raised platforms to give at-level boarding. In the other two pictures here, you can see these are St. James Park. And you can see in the middle slide here, this is from the southbound trains along Second Street go right through the center of the park currently. Next slide. And then the last set of pictures, on the left, you can see an example of the driveways that I mentioned that cross our tracks. There's actually a car here photographed currently idling on the trackway. You can see some of the amenities that exist in the median with the bathroom there. And then on the right, this is an entrance to a parking garage and apartment complex, another example of those driveways that can cause some issues for us. And now I believe we're going to have a Mentimeter about some questions. Now that we've familiarized ourselves with the area, about what kind of downtown amenities are important to you.
Just wanted to add here, if you've never used Menti, please use your second device to scan the QR code. And once you're in, if you can give a thumbs up, that way we know that you guys are in there, so we can just go ahead and start. Okay, so now we're gonna give everyone a minute to decide their options, and you guys will quickly see everyone else's improvement options here. Okay, I'm just gonna give it a few more seconds because it looks like almost everyone is done inputting their feedback. Okay, I'm just gonna hand it over to Nick to talk a little bit about what we just saw.
Sure. So it looks like a decent spread here. I see wider sidewalks as the most popular option. I would say overall, these results track a lot with what we've been seeing in our community outreach that we've been doing at different events so far. I also see bus lanes, safety features being important, bike lanes, loading zones, maybe not as much, but that is something that we've heard from local businesses in the area. So this is great. Thank you for your feedback. And now Jason's going to take it away to talk more about the project.
Great, thanks, Nick. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about our alternatives development process. When we were looking at different alternatives to realign the tracks downtown, we really looked at kind of a pretty large area. Our project area really included everything in this sort of blue shaded region. So essentially Market, First and Second Street in the north and southbound direction, and Santa Clara, San Fernando Park, and San Carlos in kind of the east-west configuration. So we really looked at almost every combination of kind of north and south and east and west streets in this corridor. And then if we move on to the next slide, I do want to note that we also looked at different what I'll call vertical configurations, including elevating the tracks, keeping the tracks at grade how they are today, or even putting the tracks below grade in a tunnel configuration. Next slide, please. So we considered, roughly probably close to 30 different alternatives when you kind of mix and match all those different options. But we did end up quickly eliminating a handful of options, specifically the above grade, so like an elevated viaduct, or the below grade, such as like a tunnel. We eliminated those alternatives partially due to the cost implications, but actually mostly due to the construction impacts that we were anticipating to downtown businesses and residents. Want to stress that we've been hearing a lot from the community about maybe some of the potential fears of future construction downtown. And we really want to make sure that we were trying to find less impactful projects for the community for this light rail project. A couple things I want to note. This picture on the side is of the San Francisco Central Subway construction. This is Stockton Avenue. They constructed a below grade station and tunnel in this area, and Stockton Street here was closed for multiple years. And so we're really trying to find something that's less impactful to the community with our project. I also want to note something that where we would be have a elevated viaduct, while maybe less impactful than this, would still be pretty impactful due to the heavy equipment needed to actually build pillars and other kind of support structures for those elevated structures. So really for those reasons, we really focus on these accurate alternatives where the tracks would be on the street as they would be less impactful and kind of more cost effective to what we're seeing. I also want to note that we did look at multiple kind of east-west configurations, maybe putting light rail on Santa Clara or San Fernando. A lot of those got eliminated because we found some pretty significant potential impacts of those alignments. Just one example, San Fernando may have required or it may have caused some impacts to some potentially historic structures in the area. And so if we go on to the next slide, I can talk about kind of where we ended up with alternatives process. So as I mentioned, this light blue blocks is kind of where we started with. And if we move to the next slide, the project area ended up focusing on First Street and Second Street, essentially in the same corridor as it does today. However, the project that we're going to be focusing on would essentially remove the track from Second Street and then rebuild First Street into a two-track corridor. So First Street has one track today. In the future, what we're proposing would have two tracks, but be rebuilt in a safer, more kind of operating efficient way to allow us to operate at higher speeds and to allow for safer movements in the corridor. One of the other things I want to note here is this project would potentially remove a lane of traffic from First Street, which would then allow us to move all buses to Second Street. And so in this new configuration, First Street would be the light rail corridor and Second Street would be the bus corridor. Next slide, please. So I want to go into some more project specifics. So these are kind of the existing on the left and the proposed project on the right. I know they look very similar, so I want to point out some very key specifics to you. So next slide. On First Street, this is kind of where most of the action would happen, really. We would essentially rebuild First Street into a new two-track corridor, as I mentioned. So two tracks would be on First Street, and it would essentially look very different than it does today. Next slide, please. One of the other key changes we're proposing is reducing the number of stations. So today in the current configuration with the couplets, as Nick mentioned, we have 6 station platforms, 3 northbound and 3 southbound on Second. What we're proposing is essentially reducing this down to 2 station locations, which would accommodate trains in both directions. One of the stations would remain at San Antonio. This is a really great location for us. It's a key station for San Jose State students, and the platform would generally be located where it is today, except it would accommodate trains from both directions. The new station that we're proposing would be north of Santa Clara Street. We would essentially consolidate the current Santa Clara stations and St. James stations, which are north of St. John and south of Santa Clara, into a new station that is just north of Santa Clara Street. This would allow for direct connection to the future BART station. So the BART station and the light rail stations would essentially be right around the corner from each other. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about Second Street. So Second Street would have the track fully removed, and that includes the trackage that's currently on San Carlos and Divine. This would allow Second Street to essentially be reimagined, and we have been working with the city of San Jose to kind of come up with some concepts about what this could potentially look like. One of the key features I want to note is St. James Park, which is currently going through a redevelopment process. This would allow the park to essentially join back together as one park as it was kind of way back when. Next slide. I want to go over some of the key benefits of the project. I think a lot of people kind of can understand what some of the reasons why we're doing this project, but we want to talk about some specifics. So some of the keys, as Nick mentioned earlier, our current operating speed has a maximum speed of 10 miles per hour in the downtown section. This is the slowest segment of light rail in all of California. We've talked to regulatory agencies in California who govern track speeds and track safety through the state. And we believe we'd be able to increase our maximum operating speeds to 20 miles per hour with some of these changes that we're proposing. This would mean a 1-minute savings in the northbound direction, but this would mean a 3-minute savings in the southbound direction, which is pretty significant. A lot of this would come from reducing and eliminating some of those curves that we have there today. I think specifically, though, this would really create much safer operations. It would create better separation between the tracks and the sidewalk. Nick mentioned they're flush today, so it's hard to tell what you're walking on. And it would also reduce the points of conflict, where there's a significant number of driveways on Second Street, And so this would actually remove a lot of those driveways. We've taken a lot of, we'll say, inspiration from other light rail agencies through the country. These are just a couple examples on the side. Maybe some key safety features I want to note here. In Santa Monica, with the LA Metro line that operates there today, you'll see that there's a curb separating the road from the trackway. And they have these little kind of bumps and humps that delineate the trackway from the street, hopefully preventing cars from driving onto the trackways, which we know happens a lot in downtown San Jose. Additionally, maybe I'll mention Portland as well, where the trains are really situated in the roadway and not on the sidewalk. And they also pave their trackway with cobblestone, which is another feature to help people understand if they're walking or driving on that trackway area. Next slide, please. I also want to point out some key potential community benefits to the project. One of the big things is removing the tracks from Second Street, as I mentioned, could allow us to really reimagine what that looks like. The picture on the bottom right is Denver, Colorado, and their transit mall. They have a transit mall where essentially it's one lane where buses operate on, and every business there has really large sidewalks, outdoor dining. It's become a really nice kind of pedestrianized area. And this is just one example of what we could potentially see Second Street turn into. And as I mentioned before, this would allow for the full reunification of St. James Park. The top right picture is the proposed design plan for the park. And this would really allow for both the full reunification because it would remove the tracks from the park area, as well as the city already has plans to remove the street from St. James Park. Next slide. I did want to go over some key specifics of the project. We've put together a couple photo simulations to hopefully help people understand what this project may look like. So on the left is the existing First Street corridor. As you'll see, there's a sidewalk, an auto lane, a bus lane on the left, and then on the right, there's kind of this median, one track and the other sidewalk. And you kind of see the median, the track, and the sidewalk are all at the same level. On the right, we're showing what we propose as part of this project, where you would have the roadway, but then you essentially have a curb that would separate separate the trackway from the streets. And the trackway would essentially be at this level lower, as you see. It's a little hard to tell in this photo, but there would essentially be a curb step up from the trackway to the sidewalk. And this is just one example of what this could look like, where we also are potentially looking at additional safety features to create a better delineation, such as some of the ones that we saw in the last couple photos. Next slide. And I think one of the key things I want to use this photo simulation to point out is that hashed area between the roadway and the tracks. In this photo simulation, we showed it as a hashed area, but really the key here is that we can use this as flexible space. This could be used for really almost anything. If some of you have taken some of our surveys earlier, and then we'll with some of the slides later on, we've shown that this could be used as additional sidewalk space, maybe potential loading zones. We've heard both loading and pickup and drop off are key needs of the downtown area. Could be used as another traffic lane if that's what we really wanted. But really the nice thing is that the space is really flexible and can be used for a number of different purposes. Next slide. To get into some more specifics and give you some additional examples of where some of these features are used. This is First Street and what it would look like at the two station locations. The cross section shows a good example of what we could fit in where a station is located. What we're proposing here is essentially a sidewalk, one through lane, and then outside transit shelters with the two tracks in the middle. I think one of the key things I want to note here is on the right, you see that the transit shelter or the light rail platform would essentially be built into the sidewalk. This is not a unique configuration. We see this in other places around the country. One of the examples we want to use is San Diego. This is a portion of kind of the western edge of their transit mall where they have a very similar configuration. Next slide. One of the keys, though, is that was what we just showed is just at the two station locations. Between the stations, which is a more majority of the section of First Street, there's a lot of flexibility, and a lot of other cities do things very differently, and there's lots of different options. Want to note that in Salt Lake City, while this is at a station platform, it does show that they have combined their auto lane with their bike lanes to make the also provide space for things like passenger loading and pickup drop off. The bottom left picture is Minneapolis, where they've kind of taken a very different approach, where they have the two tracks and only one auto lane kind of through the corridor, but they have very, very wide sidewalks. This helps accommodate a lot of pedestrian movements in the area and really makes it a much more pedestrian-friendly place compared to maybe some other places where tracks are. If we move on to the next slide, I think we're moving on to our next Mentimeter. And I think if you're in Menti, it's probably still on the correct site. So if any of you taken our survey already, essentially the same question. So we wanted to get a better sense of what people were looking for with the option. So option one would be something that's a little more driving and parking focused. So we would take that flexible space I was noting and turn it into a parking or pickup drop-off lane or something similar. If we move on to the next slide, option two would be something much more pedestrian focused. In this example, we're showing it as kind of a central median. But the sidewalk space could really be added to either the east or west side of the street. This is just one example of what it could look like. And then option three would be something fully driver focused. So this would be essentially just two different drive lanes for traffic. So not really any pickup drop off, not really any parking. This would really just be to have, kind of cars operating next to our two trains in the corridor. And so with this, want to get a better sense of out of these options, what people cared about the most or what people liked the most. And similar to the first Mentimeter, I think we're seeing a lot of public sentiment for these more pedestrian-focused improvements in the corridor. This also lines up pretty closely with kind of what we've been seeing with our public outreach so far as well. Maybe I'll give it a couple more moments as the last couple people still have an opportunity to vote on the Mentimeter. Great. Thanks again. We appreciate your responses. Thank you again for your feedback. Next, we want to move on to Second Street. As I mentioned or mentioned earlier, with the removal of tracks on Second, this really opens up Second to be almost anything that we can imagine. I showed you earlier example from Denver, Colorado, and their pedestrian mall. Want to bring up two additional examples that we could kind of use as inspiration. One is a portion of downtown Oakland, where they want to prioritize bus service in the area. So they have bus lanes and auto lanes that are combined with bike lanes. And then they have space on the outsides for, relatively wide sidewalks and bus shelters. On the bottom left, San Francisco took a very different approach where they created separated bike lanes in this corridor. And then the buses and cars operate on the same lanes. But then this allows some additional space for things like left turn pockets or some other kind of uses that you need on this street. I think with that, I want to move on to the next slide, which will be kind of our final Mentimeter for tonight. And this will essentially be to get a better sense of what people want to see on Second Street. The first option would be something that's a little more bus transit focused. And so in this option, we found that we could fit in bus lanes, driving lanes, and bike lanes, but the sidewalks would be reduced down to pretty narrow sidewalks. We go to option two. This would be something a little more driver focused and loading focused. So the sidewalks would be kind of more to City of San Jose standard. And then we have lanes and parking lanes kind of on this corridor with also fitting two-way bike lanes on one side of the street. If we move on to option three, this is something much more pedestrian focused where we would expand the sidewalks pretty widely, something wider than I think most other places in downtown San Jose. and really reduce the number of lanes to two. And so these two lanes would be shared traffic with both buses and cars. And additionally, we would have a two-way bike lane here. And then finally, this would be something a little more kind of driver bus focused, where we would move the bike lanes completely. We would have bus lanes and car lanes separately in this corridor. And then the sidewalks would be really more closer to city standards in this section. So if we move on to the next slide, yeah, please let us know out of these four options, what really spoke to you the most. And as I mentioned, these are just example options, and we're trying to get a better sense of the treatments we want to focus on. Um, some of the treatments in the next set of designs may look kind of like a combination of these. We're really just trying to get a sense of what the public is interested in. So this is a little interesting because this is a little different than what we saw with First Street. We're seeing that many of you are more focused on the bus transit focus alternative here, and the designs that would kind of help buses out a little bit more. And then with kind of some late votes coming in, we're seeing that the pedestrian focus designs are now in second place. Um, yeah, thank you again for your feedback, and we're going to move on to the next slide. And with this, I'm going to hand it off to Omar to talk a little bit more about our public outreach process and how we'll kind of be finishing it.
Thank you, Jason. Yes. Talk a little bit about our community outreach and the ways that we try to reach folks for this project. We have participated in several pop-up events across San Jose. To start off, we did the National Night Out at the St. James Neighborhood Association at the Hillbrook School. That was on August 5th. We did the the San Jose Jazz Festival. That was on August 8th. We did Silicon Valley Pride on the 31st of August. Viva Calle on September 7th, and we recently did the Transit Month panel at San Jose State University on the 22nd of this month. Obviously, we have today's virtual meeting. We will have another business and stakeholder meeting here on October 7th. And then also on the 28th of October, we have the downtown historic meeting that we will be doing with the Downtown Association. So if anybody knows any business folks who can attend, we would ask them to please join us any of these upcoming meetings that we have. And we also currently have, as Jason mentioned, we have the online survey. Some of you may have already taken it, but please use this as a time if you haven't taken it to submit feedback. It is open until the 10th of October, and we will make sure to drop. I believe we have a QR code here if you would like to take the online survey. And so now we will do the Q&A. Please please use the Q&A button on the Zoom to submit any of your questions. We'll give you here a little bit. So please submit any questions that you may have about the project on the Q&A button here on Zoom. Give it a few moments. All right, we will start off here. A question from Kyle. Was a hub station ever considered for Cesar Chavez Park?
Sure, I'll take this one. It was considered with some of the options that we were looking at, potentially putting the alignment on Market Street. I think with focusing the alignment on First Street, we kind of really felt like it didn't really make sense to have a new station at Cesar Chavez Park. So this is why we kind of end up with the two station locations that we chose that I presented earlier.
Thank you, Jason. Let's see. Do another question here. How well, from Betsy, thank you so much for your question. How well are similar separations working to prevent vehicle incursion on tracks elsewhere, for example, on Capitol or North First Street? It seems like that happens now and then, regardless of existing barriers and markings.
Yeah, maybe I can say that it's pretty hard to prevent all cars from driving on tracks. Things just happen sometimes. We do have instances where cars will drive onto the tracks no matter what safety features you put there. Um, I think maybe the best way I can note is when we look at the safety features that I kind of mentioned earlier and how they're used in other cities that maybe have similar configurations to downtown San Jose. Those safety features work pretty well. I think maybe the ones that I want to note the most is I went over this briefly. There are these little bumps that kind of appear in front of the trackway. This really does do a lot in preventing cars from letting them know that they're on the tracks and kind of keeping them off the tracks. Today, I think with our configuration, it is just very hard for cars to know when they're on the tracks, specifically when they're turning from San Carlos onto First Street. I think that's the location that we see the most instances of cars driving on our track. So we do think a lot of these new safety features will do prevent a lot of that from down the downtown section moving forward.
Thank you, Jason. A question here from Jordan. Why was the current route and configuration chosen? What assumptions and goals led to those designs being chosen as the best designs at the time? And what has changed that makes those assumptions and goals no longer hold?
So I'll say that's a good question. As Nick mentioned in the presentation earlier, this alignment was constructed in the 80s. So I actually don't know if there's anyone still at VTA from that time when these were constructed. I think what I can say is this type of configuration, while is not quite unique to VTA, other cities have something that's closer to a couplet configuration. I think that the design that was very unique to VTA was how it was constructed in the trackway and the tracks and sidewalks being at the same level. There are a couple other cities where you may see stuff like that, but a lot of them have initiated similar projects to essentially improve safety at those locations. Um, so again, can't really tell you about why the current configuration was chosen. But I think maybe what I can say is if we were to kind of build light rail from scratch today, we would definitely not build it in the way that it's currently built in downtown San Jose. We would build it to kind of a more modern standard.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. A question here from Tom Patterson. Why is there no option that completely restricts driving, keeps biking, and bus lanes?
That's a good question. And that's something that we would actually be happy to consider. We do understand that a lot of businesses in downtown likely need some kind of circulation. We'll need some pickup drop off. But I think we're happy to consider something that may kind of reduce that pretty significantly. Like, for example, a lane that may be drop off only or something like that. And so if that's what you want to see, we would love to hear that in the comments. We'll be collecting that information kind of as we look forward with our future designs. So yeah, if again, if that's what you want, if anyone attending this meeting is thinking of an option that they did not see today, we would love to hear more about that.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's see. Can you explain how those travel time savings were calculated? Only saving 1 minute northbound seems low. I would imagine that removing the station alone would save a minute.
Sure, maybe I can start off and then I'll hand it off to Nick to talk a little bit more about our data. Um, we conducted a little bit of simulation modeling to help us understand what this looks like. And I'll say the section of track is relatively short. So a minute is kind of maybe more significant of amount of time than you may expect. But you're right. I think a minute is maybe on the low end of our estimates. I think, and we see most of the savings on the southbound direction. But maybe I'll hand off to Nick to talk a little bit more about kind of our speed assumptions in the area. I know there was also another question related to um, the 10 versus 20 mile per hour speeds and kind of what time improvements we would see. So I'll hand off to Nick to talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, it's a great question. You know, you noted that the station would take off a minute. I think our assumption is basically a 30-second dwell per station. So, that's an automatic benefit that you're getting just from reducing the stations from 3 to 2. As far as the speed, as Jason noted, it is a very small area, and we are still constrained by intersections with signal lights. So this is not a fully protected right of way for our trains. So the modeling assumes that you're not always hitting 20 miles per hour throughout that corridor. And then I would also just add, as Jason noted, a minute might not seem like much, but we are talking about a 15 to 20% reduction in the overall travel time in this very short section from Convention Center to Japantown. And then I would just also, finally add that this is assuming current signal policies, and that's something that VTA is working on through our TSP program to hopefully better align the speeds to time with signals. So we might be able to see hopefully better time savings.
Thank you, Nick and Jason. Another question here. How will people transfer between the light rail trains and buses on Second Street?
Sure, that's a great question. This is something that we're still, I'll be honest, still figuring out a little bit. But I think one of the keys here is that most of the buses that are traveling on Second Street will also be on Santa Clara Street. Right, so a lot of the buses coming up from South County, such as the 68 and 568, would be going north on Second Street and then turning left on Santa Clara. And so that the transfer would actually be first in Santa Clara for those connections. We're still kind of figuring out what this looks like for all the different bus routes down there. But I just want to note that because of the way our buses turn in downtown, there's kind of other connection points than those current kind of cross-platform connections we have today.
Thank you, Jason. How will cars be prevented from entering the track and blocking trains?
This is a great question, similar to a question before. As I mentioned, we're going to do our best with additional safety features to change kind of how those entrances to the trackways look. Today, again, I mentioned it's very easy for a car to drive onto the track on First Street from San Carlos when they make that turn. And so we are going to really try to make it a key feature to create a better visual connections and signals to help drivers understand where they should be driving and where they shouldn't be driving.
Thank you, Jason. Will there be signal priority on First Street to expedite train movement?
Yes, we currently have signal priority. Admittedly, it's maybe not the best signal priority and something that we have been working with the city to improve. Um, what we're hoping for is with the increased speeds, we would be able to kind of work with the city to better time the signals for those new speeds. Um, so yeah, we are hoping to kind of improve signal priority through the corridor with this project, kind of in addition to the structural features that we're looking at.
Thank you, Jason. Nick says here, please define TSP for those who are not familiar. Should have asked that earlier. Sorry about that.
Yeah, thank you, Betsy. That's a great reminder. Yeah, so that was TSP as transit signal priority. This is an effort that VTA is undertaking in collaboration with all of the cities in Santa Clara County to better align our traffic signals with our transit systems, including light rail, so that when trains and buses are approaching a light, that they receive a green light more often and can get moving.
Thank you, Nick. What is the estimated cost of the realignment project?
We are still working on those cost estimates. I think what I can say is we're anticipating a construction cost estimate somewhere in the range of 50 to 75 million dollars. But as I mentioned before, we don't have any funding to kind of keep this project moving past this current phase. And so, once we do a little bit more engineering, get a better sense of what's out there, we'll get our kind of more keyed into our estimates. I do think some of the things I want to note, though, is uh, this is significantly more cost effective than if we built an elevated structure or an underground structure. Those types of projects in this location would likely cost somewhere between 5 to 10 times more than our current project cost estimate. We also think that we believe we can do this project without taking any right of way, which essentially means we don't think we would have to acquire any property as part of this project because of this kind of lighter style of construction that we're anticipating. So all those things lead to, I'll say, kind of less riskier construction, which means potentially more cost-effective cost estimates and solutions for what we're looking at.
Thank you, Jason. Similar on the same kind of question, is there an estimate of the operation savings from the reduced maintenance liability, increased speeds, and et cetera?
We don't have one yet. As I mentioned, we have the travel time savings that we believe are going to accrue from this project. We haven't quite translated that to operating cost savings yet. In terms of maintenance, though, we actually hopefully think that this will be a reduction in at least a slight reduction in maintenance costs, just consolidating the tracks on one corridor, reducing the number of curves we have on the system. And yeah, we just kind of think it's a better configuration for kind of what we're working with.
Thank you. Are there any plans to redevelop the parking lots and old pavilion shopping malls between San Fernando and San Carlos?
And that's a great question, and I'll be honest and say I don't know. This would actually be a much better question for City of San Jose staff. Um, and so we're happy to reach out to them. This is also something that we'll definitely look into as we progress this project further. But at this point, I think our hope is there are plans to redevelop those and really build some additional kind of density around our system.
Thank you, Jason. From the business community you've talked to so far, is there an equal need for loading zones on First and Second Street, or does one street have a greater need than the other?
Maybe I'll start off and I'll also pass this off to Nick to say a little bit more. We've had one meeting with the business community so far, and we have another one scheduled, as Omar mentioned earlier. Um, we don't quite have a sense of kind of the loading zone needs, but we are trying to get a better sense of that moving forward. But maybe I can maybe pass off to Nick to if he wants to mention any specifics that we are kind of encountering with that.
Yes, we did hear, from a representative from the, Hammer Center, the Hammer Theater there. They get a lot of foot traffic from rideshare programs. We've also heard from other businesses, particularly in the very dense stretch from San Fernando to Santa Clara on First Street. It's probably the most dense form of active businesses there about, loading concerns and needs. And I think really this is just going to be an approach that we take block by block. Just depending on the various business needs.
Thank you, Nick. Another question here. Why aren't you considering an option for Second Street that keeps bus transit lanes and bike lanes, but not car lanes?
I think we answered a similar question to this earlier, and as I mentioned, if this is what you want to see, please let us know in the comments. All the comments and feedback we're receiving, we're going to kind of carry forward into our further design process. So yeah, again, some of the options that we looked at are just options that we put together as staff that we thought were appropriate for kind of location, but we would love to hear what we missed.
Thank you, Jason. How does this affect the VTP 2050 item on downtown grade separation?
That's a really good question. What I'll say is originally we were considering a much bigger project for this location. But as I mentioned, because of some of the concerns related to both tunnel construction as well as constructing an elevated viaduct, we kind of pivoted to kind of this project where we're focusing more on an at-grade solution. And so I would assume that, when we do update VTP moving forward, kind of in the next round coming up, like this, we're going to essentially kind of shift our thinking to this project is kind of my hope. Yeah, but maybe kind of I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Jason. What happened to the pilot program in 2019 that was supposed to put up fencing along the tracks?
That's a great question. It actually happened. If you notice on Second Street, there's a portion that I believe is between San Carlos and San Fernando that has a portion of railing kind of adjacent to our tracks. This was the kind of the only the only stretch of track that we put the railing on. We actually think it works pretty well, but through consultation with the city of San Jose and some of the other stakeholders down there, we did not move forward with further railing downtown. I will say though that I think part of this is looking at a more kind of bigger solution than the railing, and so I think maybe some of those lessons learned from the railing we're going to bring into this project as well.
Thank you, Jason. What will the experience be like for people with disabilities?
That's a good question. I think that's something we also want to better understand as we move this project forward. Um, I will say that, I think we are hoping to prevent more or create a safer environment for pedestrians, for people with disabilities, people with mobility devices on the transit mall, and create a better situation for them. We think really separating the sidewalk from the trackway will help kind of foster safer movements for really all people. But we would love to hear more from the community to understand if there's anything we're missing kind of with these designs or anything we should be considering as we move forward.
Thank you, Jason. Another question here. Do we need to wait for years, decades, long process to remove the St. James station if it is a very underutilized station? Could that be done independently as a short-term project? What would get in the way of getting that done sooner?
No, that's a good question. I think that's something I don't know if we would consider at this point. Typically, with some of these big changes we make, we want to kind of make them all together. We don't really want to move forward with this project piecemeal, and so I would say if we do get the opportunity to really turn this project into reality, we'd probably wait for that opportunity to close the station. Um, yeah, I think that's kind of the direction we would hope to go with this.
Thank you. The current configuration allows trains from the south to short turn at the north end of downtown. Will there be any way to replicate this operational flexibility?
We are still figuring that out. I think that is a very good point. We would love the flexibility to figure out a way to turn trains around downtown still. And I think that is something that we're still working on. So, maybe the next iteration of this design will include something like that. We just don't quite have anything ready yet to kind of, I'll say, like show publicly in terms of kind of what that might look like.
Thank you. Let's see here. Sorry about that. Why are you going to remove the track from Second Street? Why not just leave it there unused so that you can accommodate higher frequency when in the future you have additional lines? This was the mistake when the streetcar was phased out. Had we kept the rails of the old streetcar lines, we could have built out so much faster. We might have Willow Glen with the station already. We had gotten to Cupertino already, and I'm sorry, we'd have the infrastructure for a route direct from downtown to Alumra, plus the rails from Alameda to Ohlone Chenoweth still exist. It's a long question. Sorry about that.
It's okay, Omar. I'll say I think we are realizing the benefits to this project are really twofold. As I mentioned, putting the tracks on First Street and reconfiguring it to kind of what we're seeing on the screen right now would help VTA, help our safety needs, or our safety desires, maybe is a better way of saying it, and improve our system speeds. Um, but we really think that eliminating the tracks from Second Street brings a lot of community benefits. I keep going back to this, but the plan to reunify the park. The park was originally, one big, beautiful park, and removing the tracks would allow that to kind of happen again. And so we are kind of seeing both the benefits of improving the transit on one street and essentially removing the track from the other street. I do hear you with kind of all the other transit needs and rail needs in the area, but I think with this project, we are kind of seeing those benefits kind of twofold on both sides.
Thanks, Jason. Question for Nick. Can the cloud TSP system that is being deployed for the buses be used for light rail as well? Can that be done in the short term?
Thanks, Omar. It's a great question. Yes, yes. The answer is affirmatively yes. That the same TSP system can be used for both trains and bus, and in fact is underway, particularly on our North First Street corridor, where we see a lot of intersection delay for our trains. That's an ongoing effort.
Thank you, Nick. Let's see here. Um, would it not be more space conservative to replicate Japantown center platform instead of side running platforms?
That is an option, and thank you for bringing that up. I think in some of the designs, we kind of looked at both options. With the current configuration, we felt that the side platforms would kind of accommodate some of the other things we're looking at a little bit better. But as part of the next set of designs, we may consider center platforms again, just depending on what other constraints we're looking at. So, this is kind of a way of saying it could be either. We just, with the current design, chose side platforms.
Thanks, Jason. Another question here. How are you coordinating with SJDOT to balance transit signal priority between a double tracked First Street and the high bus traffic on Santa Clara Street?
Maybe I'll start off and I'll hand it off to Nick a little bit to talk a little bit more about some of the TSP questions that keep coming up. And so, we do coordinate pretty closely with the city on TSP. We meet with them pretty regularly. And I think once we get this project kind of further along in design, as I mentioned, we would probably have kind of more in-depth discussions about what TSP may look like here and how that kind of coordinates up north first. But please, Nick, if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, I would just reference that, as we're doing this engagement effort, the city is underway with their Reimagining Santa Clara project. They actually tabled right next to us at Viva Calle. And, definitely part of their conversation is the interplay. We also want to keep in mind, what VTA's visionary network will look like. And so, yeah, the very high frequency of buses that we'll have running through downtown, both on Santa Clara Street and north, a double tracked North First Street with the trains. That's a great point, and definitely something we have to take into consideration for the coming years.
Thank you. Another question here. How high off the ground would a viaduct have to be, and how much horizontal distance would be needed to get from at grade to the height needed to have the proper clearance over Santa Clara Street and the other East and West Street?
This is a very good, very technical question. And I'll say we did take a little bit of a look at this. For example, if we were to build a viaduct, it would look very similar to the viaducts that are currently being constructed for the EBRC project. So they're very wide, they have very large pillars and substructures underneath. And those substructures, I do want to note, go very deep underground. In terms of how much distance you need to actually get over that actually is one of the tricks to this project, where because of the way the tracks curve, you typically try not to do a lot of, I'm going to get very technical, some light rail stuff right now. You typically do not want tracks to curve both horizontally and vertically at the same time. And so it makes the design for something as, we'll say, narrow and constrained as downtown to build a viaduct through this corridor. So I know that's not directly answer your question in terms of kind of what the specific distance is. I will say that finding enough kind of straight track and straight kind of streets to build these viaducts on is pretty difficult from what we had looked at.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. Are there any proposed station designs? How will they be designed to accommodate the new 150-foot long trains?
We currently do not have any station designs. These would be kind of brand new designs from the ground up. And maybe the nice thing is the current platforms, as most of you know, are kind of in these three separate kind of 90-foot platforms. The new platforms would essentially be designed to roughly about 300 feet long, which would accommodate either a three-car train of our current train cars, or a two-car train of these potentially longer cars that I believe many of you have heard about kind of in the news. So either way, it'll accommodate whatever trains we have in the future.
Thank you, Jason. What is the average time it takes to get southbound from Japantown to the convention center station? I'm trying to better understand the percentage improvement that 3 minute represents. When considering a ride from Tasman to convention center, 3 minute improvement doesn't feel that significant to me unless paired with a few other speed improvements. What total benefits can we get with this project and other projects that are currently in the pipeline for the near/medium term?
Maybe I'll start and I'll hand it off to Nick to talk a little bit more about maybe some of the times that we're seeing down there. Um, I do want to say that I think one of the things that we've heard a lot about the light rail system in downtown is it just feels really slow. We kind of know how fast the speeds are, but it feels so much slower than that. And so one of the nice things about this project is we hope it'll kind of improve public perception just in terms of how it feels to be on the train. I think what's interesting is it feels like a lot of people take the train to downtown, but they don't. But the people who take the train through downtown and sit on the train as it's going 6 miles per hour just feel a really slow ride. And so what we're hoping is that while 3 minutes may not sound like a lot, for a lot of these trips, it'll feel like much more. But maybe I can hand off to Nick if you have any additional details about kind of what this looks like percentage wise or minutes wise in other places.
Yeah, Jason, unfortunately, I don't have the numbers up directly in front of me, so I don't remember exactly what the 3 minutes represents percentage-wise, but I think you nailed nailed the nail on the head with your description of the real speed benefits. And I would also say in the question, on a trip from Tasman to Convention Center, yes, that's a quite long trip. But we also know from our data that a lot of our riders are taking much shorter journeys and perhaps would go through the downtown area more. So if it wasn't so slow.
Thank you. Another question here. Will there be space for buses and light rail trains to layover for future time transfer connections?
For buses, definitely. As Nick mentioned, there's a separate project going on, the Reimagine Santa Clara project, which is being led by the city, and we're working with them to figure out how to kind of better design what our bus stops are going to look like in that area, which will hopefully allow for things like some space to wait for time connections and different things. For light rail, I think with the way that we are planning to operate trains in the future, we're hoping we're not going to need a lot of space to lay over trains for a long time. We're hoping, trains are going to be coming every couple minutes, from these two different lines and coming from lots of different directions. And so I think maybe the hope is you don't really need those really big time transfers because trains will be coming every couple minutes.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's see here. What is the time frame to complete this project?
That's a great question, and I think it's something that we knew we were going to get. I'll say we don't quite have a time frame for this. As I mentioned earlier, we don't quite have funding to keep this project moving forward. Um, but if we did get funding, I think one of the big keys to this is not one of those projects that feels like a decades long project, right? As I mentioned, we're trying to target kind of more cost effective, quicker construction methods with our configuration. And so we really think that this would be, once construction gets started on this project, it may be a couple years to really get it completed and operating versus some of these other bigger projects that take much longer than that.
Thank you, Jason. Let's see here. Can you guys improve the lighting at the station? It feels kind of dark and sketchy.
Thanks for that question. We will take that note back to kind of our colleagues. Yeah, agree. Safety is a big priority for us, and so um, yeah. And I think that's also one of those things that we should probably work on before this project really gets off the ground, because we want to make sure that both our passengers in the future and our passengers today feel safe at our station. So yeah, let me take that back to our colleagues and we'll see what we can do.
Thank you, Jason. Maybe a question for Nick here. Could it be possible to coordinate with SJDOT to get actuated signal priority or pre-mention for the minor intersections that the tracks cross, specifically not including Santa Clara Street? I'm sorry if I butchered that.
No, you did a great job, Omar. Yeah, that's a great question, and I actually think it brings up a really interesting point, talking about signal priority versus signal preemption. TSP comes in all kinds of different flavors, and it takes a lot of testing and refinement to kind of get right. What I will say is that's definitely possible. It's definitely something that has come up in our conversations with the city. They've designated First Street as a transit priority corridor. So, in theory, that means that transit has priority on the street, and how we're assessing, priority needs for moving through that corridor. So that's definitely something that's on the table, and might make sense with the quantity of trains we would expect on this corridor.
Thank you, Nick. Last couple questions here. Have you considered leaving a block of track on San Carlos to be used as a pocket track for potentially turning trains? I believe you might have answered this a little bit ago.
Yeah, this is pretty similar to another question. I think that's a great question. We are still figuring out dates for potentially turning trains downtown. Once we remove the tracks from Second, so that could be an option that we look at moving forward.
Thank you, Jason. Last question here. Why did you eliminate Almaden Boulevard from consideration? It looks quite overbuilt, and I've never seen it at all that busy.
I'm gonna have to think about this one. We eliminated a lot of the alternatives for different reasons. Maybe one of the things that we were really trying to figure out is how to essentially put in less turns for the tracks downtown as opposed to more turns. And so, I think one of the key elements for some of the alternatives we looked at was kind of longer, straighter portions of track that we can construct in downtown. So, I would expect that was probably one of the reasons why we didn't kind of choose that alternative. And additionally, we are just looking at kind of where it would make the most sense to construct. But I think there were probably multiple options that we looked at.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's see. I believe we have one more. Do we have time for one more?
Sure. Let's take this as the last question.
The last question here. Would we be able to get a list of the original alternative? It would be interesting to see what could have been.
Let me see. This may have been discussed somewhere in a previous presentation to our board. So yeah, let me see what we can put out there, what we have already put out there publicly, and what we can add to maybe our project website in the future. But yeah, maybe I do want to verify kind of what we've looked at in the past with our board.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Nick. And that concludes our Q&A for this portion. I believe we have another slide here, just calling out for making sure if you would still like to provide any additional feedback, anything else similar to what we presented here today, that is the QR code for the online survey, and that will be live until October 10th. So please take some time to fill that out if you have not done so.
So we have reached the end of our presentation today. Thank you everyone once again for joining us.